All right, hey everybody. So today we're going to construct this 12-6-4 pattern in GeoGebra. So we're going to start by constructing the minimal triangle and making it have a parameter that varies so the angle of the pattern can change, and then we'll expand it. So let's get started by setting up some default preferences in GeoGebra. So I'm going to restore my default settings so that my screen looks like yours. So I'm going to start by hiding my grid and my axes. So if your axes are showing, right click in the graphics view and hide the axes, and we can right click in the graphics view and hide the grid. You can also hide and show them in the graphics preferences. So I can click the show grid button or the show axes buttons there. And then I'm going to go, so if you right click in the graphics view, you can get to your preferences. So I'm going to go to my default preferences and I want to make my points small. So I'm going to make them size 3. I'm going to make my lines size 2, 100% opacity gray. I want my segments to be black, also small, 100% opacity. And I want my conics to also be small, 100% opacity gray. Then I'm going to go over here to my algebra view and I want to see the definition and I want to sort by object type. And so that'll get us started. And then what I'm going to do is under options, I'm going to go to save settings. Oh, there's one more thing I want to do. Labeling. I want to label new points only. And now I'm going to save settings. All right, so I'm going to start by putting in 2 points A and B. A equals 0, 0, and I'm doing this in my input bar. If you don't see the input bar, you can go to view input bar. And I'm also going to type in B equals 1, 0, close parentheses. And so now I've got these 2 points on my screen. And the reason that I type them in rather than just using my point tool to click anywhere is because I want to make sure they are on the same horizontal line as each other. So I'm going to use my scroll wheel to zoom in. And under my polygon tool, I want to select the regular polygon tool. And I'm going to click first on A, then on B. And I want 12 vertices. And I'm going to click OK. So that created my 12-sided polygon. And I want to create a 6-sided polygon here and a 6-sided polygon here. This regular polygon tool always is going to construct counterclockwise. That's why I clicked on A, then B. So if I want to construct a 6gon here, I'm going to click first on A and then on L and tell it I want 6. And then I'm going to click first on C, then on B, and I want 6 vertices. And that gives me a little square there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some lines. But before I do that, I want to make these polygons have 0 opacity so that when I click on them, I'm not selecting the polygon. I'm clicking on the space inside the polygon. It'll just make it easier to select objects that go through them. So I don't want to be on default preferences. I want to be on object properties. So I'm going to control click the 3 of them. I could also control click and select them in the algebra view. And I'm going to go to color. So object properties, selection properties, color, 0 opacity. And now I'm going to put in some lines. So I'm going to go to my line tool. Next to my line tool is the perpendicular line tool. I want perpendicular bisector. And so I'm going to put in a perpendicular bisector between AB. And so that gives me a vertical line through my 12gon. I'm going to put in a perpendicular bisector between P and A. And I'm going to put in a perpendicular bisector between A and L. And those 3 lines form my minimal triangle. So that's the smallest repeat unit of my pattern. And so what I'm going to do is these particular 3 lines, I'm going to make a little bit thicker just so I can kind of identify them a little bit more easily later. So let's use our intersect tool to find the centers here. So I can click, notice my cursor changes to a hand as I get closer to that intersection. I'm going to click there to get that intersection, click here on this intersection. I could also select one line and then the other to get an intersection. I always want to default back to my arrow move tool so that I'm not accidentally creating something when I click off into the white space. So next thing we want to do is we want to build a scaffolding of tangent circles. And so these tangent circles are going to have their centers at the vertices of my polygons, and they're going to pass through the midpoints of the sides. So I need to define these points at the midpoint. So I'm going to use my intersect tool again, and I'm going to create these 3 points, and I'm going to draw a circle. So just the default circle with center through point, with center A that passes through those 3 points. And then I want a circle that goes here and a circle that goes here. So I'm going to go under my line tool to my segment tool, and I'm going to put in line segment UA and WA. And I'm going to grab my intersect tool, and I'm going to create this point and this point. And I'm going to grab my circle with center through point tool, and I'm going to put in this circle and this circle. And so that's my scaffolding of tangent circles. And inside each of those circles is going to live a star. So the stars of the star polygons. So this one's going to have a 6-pointed star. This one's going to have a 12-pointed star. And this one will also have a 6-pointed star, although it'll be different than this 6-pointed star. So we're going to have a 12-fold rosette here, a 6-fold rosette here, and a 4-fold rosette here. All right, so I don't want to see all these points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the word point in my algebra view. And remember, if you're not seeing them grouped like this, go to this option and sort by object type. I'm going to right click on the word point, and I'm going to click show label. And I'm going to hide those labels because I only want to see the labels for certain things. So for instance, I want to see the label of this point, but I'm going to rename it to be point P. And this point, which I'm going to rename to be point O. So I had points P and O, they just got new labels when I relabeled these. I like O because that's my origin. That's going to be the center of all of my rotations and reflections in my pattern. And this point P is where we're going to anchor our parameter for animation. So all of the pattern lines are going to be reflections of lines that pass through a point of tangency of 2 circles. And if I wanted, say, a parallel rosette in my 12-sided polygon, I could do that, but I want one that varies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a slider, and I'm just going to click in the open space, and we want our slider to represent an angle. So the default variable for angle is alpha, and we want it to vary from 0 to 90 degrees. So be careful when you're selecting in here, try not to delete your degree symbol. So I'm going to replace 360 by 90, and I want to increment by 0.5. If you accidentally delete your degree symbol, GeoGebra is going to think you mean radians, and that's very different than degrees. All right, I don't need to worry about these other tabs. We're going to click OK. And so right now, this slider just holds a numerical value between 0 and 90. What we're going to do is we're going to rotate point O about point P by angle alpha. And we're going to do that by typing the following command: rotate, open parentheses, capital O, Alt A for alpha, comma, capital P, close parentheses. And so that's rotating O by alpha about P. And then I'm going to click enter. And now when I move my slider, we can see that point O prime rotates about point P 0 degrees to 90 degrees. And so I'm going to grab my line tool. So I have segment selected, but we want the line tool. And I'm going to click on point P and then point O prime. And we can see that that line goes from being concurrent with line OP to being perpendicular with line OP. And so that's what we want. And I'm going to go ahead and hide point O prime just by clicking on the little blue circle next to it, because we don't need it anymore and I don't want it to get in the way. Now this line is going to be one of my pattern lines. So I'm going to make it blue and a little bit thicker. And that's going to help me identify it as a pattern line. Actually, let's make it this color blue so it's a little more obvious. All right, so all of the rest of my pattern lines are going to be reflections of this blue line over lines that pass through points of tangency of two circles and angle bisectors between them. So we need to put in a couple of angle bisectors. So underneath my perpendicular bisector tool, or my perpendicular line tool, there's an angle bisector tool. And so I'm going to click on P and then this central point and then this point. And so that's an angle bisector. I like to indicate those by dashed lines. And I'm going to zoom in here so we can see what I'm doing a little bit better. And I want where this line intersects that angle bisector. So I'm going to grab my intersect tool and I'm going to click right here. So notice that point just travels along that angle bisector. And I also want where this line intersects this red line. And I don't care about seeing the label there anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and hide those labels. I'll leave O for now because we're going to end up rotating about O. All right. So that's what's happening right now. It's always a good idea to kind of move your slider as you go to make sure you clicked on the right thing. All right, so next I'm going to do some reflections. So I'm going to reflect this angle bisector over this line. And then I'm going to reflect my blue line over that same line. And I'm going to grab that. Let's do no new objects so that those labels don't show up anymore. I thought I wanted the labels on the points, but I think we're just going to leave them off for our purposes here. All right, so I've got this business going on right now. I don't need either of those angle bisectors anymore. So I'm going to hide them. I'm right clicking on them and clicking show object, because they're just going to kind of get in my way. Actually, just kidding. I do still need them. I need to reflect over them. I got rid of them too quickly. So I'm going over here under line, clicking on them. I at least need this one. So I want to reflect my blue line over that angle bisector. And now I can hide it. Okay, so then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to reflect this blue line over that angle bisector. And I know it's starting to get a little busy. That's why I'm going to go ahead and hide that angle bisector. But what's happening here is the beginning of our star inside this circle. It's also starting to define the kites and petals inside here. So I'm going to go ahead and do a reflection of this blue line over this red line. And I want this point of intersection and this point of intersection. And I'm not sure why the labels showed up for those. No new objects. Save settings. Oh, and this is a good opportunity to save our file. I like to save by the date and a description. So I'm going to go to my polygon tool this time, not the regular polygon, just the polygon. And I'm going to put in this kite. And then I'm going to grab my reflective outline tool and I'm going to put in a petal here. So I'm going to reflect this point over this red line, and I want to reflect this point over this red line. And now I have a petal. So let's go ahead and fill in this rosette. So each of these polygons has a name. So this one's Q1, quadrilateral little Q1, and this one's hexagon poly 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type sequence, rotate, open curly bracket, Q1, comma, poly 4, close curly bracket, and then I'll walk you through what this is doing. So I want a sequence of rotations of these two things by pi times I over 6 about 0.0, where I varies from 0 to 11. So a sequence of rotations of some objects by this angle about O. And what I'm doing is I'm incrementing pi over 6 or 30-degree angles. So I'm rotating each of these objects by 30 degrees, no times, 1 time, 2 times, 3, all the way up to 11 times. And then I'm going to click enter. And we've got our central 12-fold rosette. All right, so now let's start to fill in the rest of this thing. I don't need this line or this line anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and hide those. I'm going to zoom back in, and I want to reflect this blue line over this line. I need to put in an angle bisector here. Notice it's tangent to this circle, so that's kind of fun. This is an angle bisector, so I'm going to make it style dashed. I want to intersect here. And I want to reflect over that angle bisector. Notice when I do that, it goes through that point of tangency of two circles. That's important. I want to reflect that line over this line segment. And I want the intersection of that line with this red line. I'm going to grab my reflective outline tool and I want to reflect this point over the red line and this point over the red line. And that's going to create my 6-pointed petal. So I've got that. And let's go ahead and create rotations of that about W. So this is poly 5 and W. So I want sequence, rotate, open curly brackets, what did I say? Poly 5 by pi I over 3 this time about W, where I varies from 0 to 5. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's W. All right, and now we need to make our little 4-fold rosette over here. So I need to put in, whoops, come on, this line segment. And I need to put in angle bisectors here and here. I don't need this angle bisector anymore, so I can hide it. And I don't need this line anymore, so I can hide it. And I don't need that line anymore, or that line anymore. I also don't need this one anymore. I want to reflect this line, blue line, over the top of this square. And I don't want this intersection unless I want an octagon here. I could put an octagon here, but I want a 4-fold rosette. So that's why I'm going to put in an angle bisector instead. So I've got that. I want to reflect this blue line over that angle bisector. Oh, let's make the angle bisector dashed. We can think about there being a little circle in the middle of this square also. I don't have to put that in there, but if it helps you see, there's going to be a little 4-pointed star that lives inside that little circle. Let's reflect this blue line over this diagonal and grab that intersection. Then I want to reflect this point over the red vertical, this point over the red vertical, and we can put in, I'm not sure what just happened. I just hit escape to get out of that tool. Let me save. All right, let me zoom in here and try that again. So I want my polygon tool. Oh, it's not grabbing. GeoGebra's acting up on me. Let's try this again. There we go. So this is point V. So I want to, now I want to rotate poly 6 about V. So I want to do sequence, rotate. I'm going to put poly 6 in curly brackets by pi I over 2 this time about V, where I varies from 0 to 3. And so if I zoom out, zooming out with my scroll wheel, I can also zoom out here. We've got the minimal information for this pattern. So now if I want to fill in more information, then I need a few extra copies of some things. So I'm going to start by reflecting this sequence over this red line. And then I need to reflect some of my minimal triangle lines. But before I do that, let me hide all of my blue lines because I don't need those anymore. And I'm going to hide all of my points, but I'm going to keep in mind that this center point was 0.0. I'm also going to hide those segments. And let's go ahead and hide our circles. Now, I also want to go ahead and hide these polygons that I've already made sequences of. So that's poly 4, poly 5, poly 6, and quadrilateral 1. So all I have here are these sequences, M1, M2, M3, and M1 prime. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to reflect this red line over this red line, and I'm going to reflect this red line over this red line. And so that builds me a bigger triangle that I can then start to reflect bits of my pattern. So I'm going to reflect this sequence over here, and I want to reflect this sequence over here, and I want to reflect this sequence over here. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these little bits and I'm going to make a bigger sequence of sequences. Some of them have weird names. So this one's M3 prime underscore 1. I'm going to rename that as M4. And I need to do one more little thing because this guy is going to have a left and a right hand version. So I'm going to just reflect it like that. And you'll see why in a second. So I want everything except M1. So that's 2, 3, 4, M1 prime, M2 prime, M3 prime, and M4 prime. I'm going to create rotations of all of those about 0.0. So remember 0.0 was right here. So I want a sequence, rotate, open curly brackets, M2, M3, M4, M1 prime, M2 prime, M3 prime, and M4 prime, close curly brackets, by pi I over 6, about 0.0, where I varies from 0 to 11. What did I do? Something weird happened. GeoGebra, what did you do? Do I want pi I over 3? I want pi I over 3, sorry, not pi I over 11. That should be M4 prime. And I think that gets everything. So M2, M3, M4, M1 prime, M2 prime, M3 prime, M4 prime, pi I over 3, and I don't need from 0 to 11, I need 0 to 5. And that's good. So now I'm going to hit enter. And so that created L1. So what I can do is I can hide M2, 3, 4, 1 prime. And so my entire pattern now is made up of these two lists, L1, M1, and now we can hide our red lines. We can change the colors of these if we want to. So let's say I want to make them purple. With maybe 25% opacity, and maybe I want to make my outlines thicker. And then let's save. I can turn I'm right clicking and I'm clicking animation on, and we can see some magic happening. So these are just variations of the same pattern. And I think I don't want my outlines to be quite so thick. I'm gonna make them 6. That way I can see the pattern a little bit better. So some kind of angles of note. 15 degrees gives you a parallel rosette inside your 12-sided polygon. 22.5 is always kind of nice. 30 degrees gives you perfect hexagons and parallel 6-fold rosettes. 45 degrees gives you parallel sides on your 4-sided rosette. All right, so I hope you enjoyed. Come back for more. Thanks so much.